Hey, it's Tony Mecia with the Charlotte Ledger, and you're listening to the Charlotte Ledger podcast. You can find out more about the Charlotte Ledger at thecharlotteledger.com. Today, I'm talking with Sucharita Kodali. She's the executive director of the Election Hub, and the Charlotte Ledger has been collaborating with the Election Hub to cover this election and to give people information about the election, about the candidates on the ballot. And so in this podcast, and which is also being put on YouTube, we're going to talk about what's on the Republican ballot in Mecklenburg County. Everything on the ballot. There's not a whole lot, but we're going to talk about it. Sucharita, welcome.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks for having me. And for those of you following through the podcast, if you happen to have YouTube, you can follow along with a screen share where we're going to show you some of those candidates and races as well.
So this is for the 2026 primary election in Mecklenburg County. We're talking about the Republican ballot. So if you're a Republican, yeah, you can vote in the Republican primary, or if you're an unaffiliated voter, you can choose to vote in the Republican primary. The election is on March 3rd. There's early voting at 19 sites in Mecklenburg County going through February 28th. And again, you can find out all the information about the candidates and what your sample ballot looks like and where those early voting locations are at theelectionhub.org. So, Sucharita, as I mentioned, if you're a Republican, if you're or an unaffiliated casting a ballot in the Republican primary in Mecklenburg County, you're not going to have a whole bunch that's on there. The main thing, I think, is this U.S. Senate race, where you have Thom Tillis, who's the incumbent. He's a Republican. He decided not to run again, and so you have an open seat. Can you talk a little bit about this race?
Yeah, so the front runner who has been endorsed by President Trump is Michael Whatley. But what is also important is that there are a number of candidates here. Michelle Morrow is one of them. You may remember her from the last statewide election in 2024. She came actually pretty close to winning the thing overall, and she upset an incumbent. There are a number of other candidates too: Richard Dancy, Don Brown, Elizabeth Temple, and Thomas Johnson. One thing of note is that Margot Dupree is on the ballot, but her candidacy was disqualified because the State Board of Elections found that she did not have a valid residential address in the state.
Yeah, and so the winner of this Republican primary will go ahead to the November election and face the winner of the Democratic primary. There are several candidates in that race. The best known is former Governor Roy Cooper. So it'll shape up. It should be kind of interesting. But on the Republican side, yeah, as you mentioned, President Trump has endorsed Michael Whatley. You have others that are saying they are going to fulfill Trump's agenda. Michelle says she's a conservative warrior and wants to take on the, quote, radical liberal agenda. We'll see how this all plays out. A number of choices there for the U.S. Senate race. But let's move on to the U.S. House. There in Mecklenburg County, there are a couple of things on the ballot. On the Republican side, you have U.S. House District 12. This is a Democratic-leaning district. It covers most of Mecklenburg County, kind of including the areas around the center city. And you have two Republicans running here, and the winner will face incumbent Alma Adams. What do we know about the candidates here in District 12 on the Republican side?
So Abdul Ali has actually run against Alma Adams in the last election, and Jack Codiga is also vying for a spot. He is more fiscally conservative. Abdul Ali is a business person and a podcaster, so you can read more about them on the Election Hub.
Okay, and then moving along to U.S. House, North Carolina District 14. This is a Republican-leaning district that covers northern Mecklenburg and the western edge of Mecklenburg, a little bit of the southern edge. And this features incumbent Tim Moore. He's the former North Carolina House Speaker, and he's running against Kate Barr. Now, it's a little bit interesting. She is actually describes herself as a progressive, and she switched from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party to take on Tim Moore because she thinks that gerrymandering needs to be highlighted, and she wanted to give him a run for his money.
Right, and she actually ran for a state legislative seat in a previous election, and also at that time had really campaigned heavily on the issue of gerrymandering and redistricting. So that is that's she's encouraging unaffiliateds to come out and vote, and hoping that unaffiliateds will actually cast their ballot here and make Tim Moore work for his job, essentially.
Right. And the winner here is going to go ahead and face the winner of the Democratic primary. We'll cover that in a separate podcast on the Democratic side. Let's move along to the General Assembly. The one thing on the ballot in Mecklenburg is North Carolina House District 105. This is southeastern Mecklenburg, runs from Pineville to Mint Hill. The winner here is going to face former Matthews Commissioner Ken McCool. This race features incumbent Tricia Cotham and challenger Kelly Van Horn. Kind of an interesting thing. They both have a background as educators, and they were both formerly Democrats.
That's right. Tricia Cotham, many of you listeners may recall, switched from the Democratic to the Republican Party in 2023 and gave the Republican legislature, then the Republican-led legislature, a supermajority in the House. Kelly Van Horn is essentially also a Democrat, and she is part of a educator group which is seating candidates for the state legislature in a number of different counties.
All right, moving right along. The other thing that's going to be on the ballot, I believe, for every Republican in the state of North Carolina is North Carolina Court of Appeals Seat 1. The winner will face incumbent Democrat John Arrowood. And what do we know about this race?
Right. So we know that the Court of Appeals is an important race because there are a number of issues like redistricting that are going to likely make their way through the courts in the coming years. This is a term that is several years. It's 8 years long. And you have Michael Byrne facing Matt Smith. Matt Smith is actually from Union County in this area. He is a sitting lower court judge, and Michael Byrne is also a judge, but not an elected judge.
Yeah, Michael Byrne is an administrative law judge from Cary, and Matt Smith is a Superior Court judge from Union County. And that's pretty much going to do it for your Republican ballot. There are no Republican candidates on the primary ballot in Mecklenburg County for the Mecklenburg County Commission, and there are no Republican candidates for local judges or sheriff. So that will do it. If you're voting in the Republican primary because you're a Republican or you're an unaffiliated taking the Republican ballot, that is pretty much going to do it. You might just have a couple things on there, but you can study everything up at theelectionhub.org and cast your ballot by March 3rd. Tuesday, March 3rd is the big day.
And the two things I'll add is that if you are unaffiliated, you can pick which ballot. There are only two ballots. So there's a Democrat and a Republican ballot this election. And the other thing is that even if you are not a registered voter, you can still register to vote if you're a resident of Mecklenburg County and otherwise have the ability to vote and you have all your documentation. You can register during early voting. There are 19 early voting spots in Mecklenburg County, greater than any other county in the state. And there are 11 and a half hours every day, every weekday that you can go and vote, plus, kind of also hours on Saturday and Sunday. So cast your ballot in the last midterm primary. Mecklenburg only had a 15% voter participation turnout level. We can do better.
All right. Thanks, Sucharita. And that early voting goes through February 28th. Appreciate you joining me. And if you want to listen to another affiliated podcast, we're going to review the Democratic ballot on a separate YouTube and a separate podcast. Thanks a lot for joining us.